Namaste, everyone. Welcome to this video looking at the Vedic astrology chart of Prince Harry. Before we begin, let us recite Om Gurave Namah 3 times. Om Gurave Namah. Om Gurave Namah. Om Gurave Namah. My name is Justin, and I'm a Vedic astrologer, having studied Vedic astrology for 20 years now, and more recently under the teachings of Sanjay and Sarbani Rath. So here is the chart of Prince Harry, and those of you who are Vedic astrologers will likely be quite familiar with this chart. And he is in the spotlight right now, so there is a lot of interest in understanding his life, his direction, his choices, the reasons why he is speaking out and speaking out with such determination. And so it's worth looking at his chart to understand. So, firstly, when we count the number of signs that are occupied by planets, okay, excluding Rahu and Ketu. So the number of signs occupied by planets, right? Here is Sagittarius is occupied, uh, Aries is occupied, Leo, uh, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio. So 6 signs are occupied by the planets. This is a special and very important yoga in the scheme of some Samkhya yogas. And this is called Dhamma yoga, when all planets occupy 6 signs. It is called Dhamma yoga. And people who are Dhamma yoga people are typically known to be benevolent, helpful, earn their wealth in virtuous ways, and that their teaching is they must learn to be kind. They must learn to be patient, but they are truthful and courageous. Those are qualities of people who have Dhamma yoga. Dhamma yoga meaning having all the planets in 6 signs. And the ruling planet for Dhamma yoga is Jupiter. So the Samkhya yoga planet, which is a very important planet for understanding whether or not one's life is going to, whether or not one's destiny is going to be actualized in one's life. The Samkhya planet, the Samkhya yoga planet is very important, and its relationship to the Atmakaraka as well as the lagnesh is very, very important. Now, the Samkhya yoga planet for Dhamma yoga is Jupiter. And look what we see here. Jupiter is lagnesh in Sagittarius in its own sign. So this is a Hamsa Mahapurusha yoga. Very, very powerful yoga. This is a chart of somebody who is destined for success, destined for uh, greatness, right? Hamsa Mahapurusha yoga. Jupiter in Kendra in its own sign, okay? And in addition to that, the part that people may not realize is that this being the Samkhya yoga planet, meaning that planet that is the connector to your destiny, it is also Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter is the Samkhya Yoga planet for a chart in which all planets reside in 6 signs. Okay, so the very, very, very auspicious and very powerful, very, very powerful Jupiter. We can say that Jupiter is perhaps the most important planet in the chart for this reason. It is lagnesh. It is the Samkhya Yoga planet. The they're both the same planet, so that connection is very strong. And in being in the first house, Jupiter aspects the Kendras, right, by Rashi Drishti. So Jupiter aspects the Kendras, and Jupiter also aspects the Konas from Graha Drishti. So Jupiter is aspecting the fourth house, the fifth house, the seventh house, the ninth house, and the 10th house. These are extremely important houses for uh, for success in life, material success, spiritual success, and so on. This is why Jupiter in the first house in Swakshetra, in Mahapurusha Yoga, is very, very, very important. Now, there are other very powerful planetary placements in the chart. Okay, Rahu is in Ayush exaltation in Taurus. The Sun is in Leo in its own sign in Svakshetra. Saturn is exalted, right? And Mars and Ketu are also in Swakshetra in their own sign. And these planets, Mars, Ketu, Sun, in their own sign, it gives a tremendous amount of stability. Now, you might say, oh, well, he wasn't a very stable person, and he did drugs, and he was all over the place, and he had mental health and depression and challenges, and of course, for understandable reasons. But that, how do we say this is how do we say that this is a stability? Well, actually, it is, because the tragedy that Prince Harry experienced is something that he is building his whole life purpose, his healing on. And that's not an easy thing to do. And that requires a lot of stability in the chart, a lot of strong planets and stable planets. So Mars, Ketu, and the Sun are very strong. And by the way, these are Agni planets, these are fire planets. So the fire planets are very stable. And the fire planets are the fighting planets. They're the planets of sight, of vision, right? The Sun is vision, Mars is battle. Uh, um, Ketu Ketu is uh, an outsider. Ketu is also comfortable being an outsider. So that strength is there. And so that is something to understand is that there are so many points of exaltation. I mean, at least Saturn, we can understand. Saturn is exalted. Saturn is exalted. And Mars Ketu is in Swakshetra. The Sun is in Swakshetra, meaning in own sign, right? Now, interestingly, like what we're seeing in the media now, what we're seeing him and the way he's relating to the media, he's coming out with such force in a way that we haven't really seen with, it's sort of a very unique and interesting story, in his life and what he's doing in the public eye. And he is taking on battle, right? He is fighting, primarily fighting the press, and he is also speaking the truth, which is de facto providing to be a problem for for his family and his, in the institution that he comes from. And we can see this in this chart, in this house here with Rahu. So Rahu is in the sixth house in Ayush exaltation. So why do I say that's important? Well, first of all, the sixth house is one of the houses of conflict. The third house is the house of battle. One may take up a sport like boxing, as an example. That would be showing in the third house. The third house is like the 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 the, the, the efforts you make to learn, to grow, maybe even to fight, and so on. But the sixth house is also a house of conflict. It's not so much a house of battle as it is a house of conflict, and it is a house of enemy relations, or it's also a house of breaking of relationships, breakdown of relationships. And so in this chart, when Rahu is in the sixth house, Rahu amplifies, Rahu magnifies, uh, and multiplies the energy of that house. So in some ways, Rahu can be an addiction. It can be addictive. It can be an obsession. It can be um, something that is not necessarily good, uh, but is something that somebody feels compelled. You feel compelled to do. And so the point here is that Rahu being in the sixth house will indicate that whether this person likes it or not, they are going to have enemies and they are going to fight. They are going to be in battle. They're going to experience conflict. And it's sort of conflict that is a prolonged period of time. Now, if you look at the Vimshotri dasha system, the scheme here, the planetary periods, you see that he entered his Rahu period in 2007. And it's going until 2025. So in 2025, in a few years, he will finish Rahu. So Rahu has been uh, in process since 2007. Rahu is drugs. Rahu is experimentation with substances, cocaine, ayahuasca, cannabis, so on. That's Rahu. Rahu is travel, foreign. So, Afghanistan, travel, outsider, being an outsider, changing things up, radical change in one's life. And more specifically, being in the sixth house in this chart, because Rahu is not always in the sixth house. But in the sixth house, Rahu is going to amplify conflict. And so this is not a chart of somebody that is going to easily back down, because there is a kind of maybe even a subconscious knowing in Harry that this is the right path. This aligns his words, his actions to the energies of the planets when he takes on the press, when he takes on falsity and lies. Um, so that is, something that is important to understand. Another important aspect here is Saturn. Saturn is in Libra in the 11th house. Now, the 11th house represents elder brothers. The third house represents younger brothers. The 11th house represents elder brothers. So here we see separation. Saturn is sorrow. Saturn is separation. Uh, even to some extent conflict, but that conflict easily resolves into separation. Whereas in the sixth house, Rahu, that's a sustained conflict. That conflict, that kind of enmity, that adversarial energy is grows over time. Now, the 11th house Saturn, this is separation, and Saturn being exalted means that for the most part, this separation is going to be clean. It's not going to be a very dirty, very backstabbing, full of loads of horrible things happening. This fact that Saturn is exalted, there is some dignity in the separation, and we will see that play out over time. um, it's not likely that the brothers will come together, and if they do, it's the coming together is going to remind them of a feeling of sorrow because of Saturn in the house of the elder brother in Harry's chart. Now we can look at William's chart and see what's happening in the third house, because that's younger brother. We can look at that. But certainly because Saturn is exalted here, so powerful, Saturn is so strong in the 11th house that we can really see the separation. So that separation is to be accepted. It's to be accepted peacefully, knowing that when they come together, when they are in the same room together, they feel miserable. They feel unhappy. That's what happens when Saturn is in a sign of of a relation, be it spouse or brother or sister or mother, father, aunt. When Saturn is in that house, you feel unhappy in their presence, uh, and this is true of them. And it's not something new. They have not been close. Actually, they have not been so close in their lives. Now, finally, I want to say one more thing, which is quite interesting about the chart. Okay, and that's this Venus. It's something I didn't mention when I was talking about the exaltations. Rahu in exaltation, Saturn in exaltation, Sun, Mars, Ketu in Swakshetra, Jupiter in Swakshetra. Those are amazing. There is one interesting aspect to this chart, which is that Venus is debilitated. Okay. And Venus there is no Nichabanga, right? There's no cancellation of debility because maybe there is cancellation of debility because the Lord of the exaltation of Venus, which is Jupiter, is Mahahamsha Purusha Yoga. So I just saw that. The Lord of the placement of Venus when it is in exaltation in Pisces is Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Hamsha Mahapurusha Yoga. So Venus has a cancellation of debility. But let me explain this. Venus is the wife, right? Venus in a man's chart is the wife. And and when a planet is in a debilitated sign, like Venus is, when a planet is in a debilitated sign, um, and it is canceled, the debility is canceled. That cancellation of debility means that there is a downfall and then there is an uprising. That downfall is real. That downfall happens. So, you know, if I were speaking to Harry, I would say that when you get married, your wife is going to experience a downfall. But because there is a cancellation of that debilitation, and mind you, a very powerful cancellation, because Jupiter is in such an exalted state in the first house as lagnesh, uh, what is achievable through that debility is beyond what could be achievable otherwise. Meaning, if it was just regular planetary placement, um, you don't have that depth of suffering and accompanying that you don't have that rebounding of a kind of exaltation that is beyond even exaltation, right? What I'm saying is Venus, if Venus was placed in Pisces, it would be exalted, but actually exaltation on its own is not necessarily that strong. Exaltation can be unstable. Venus debilitated, and the cancellation of that debilitation means incredible strength. Incredible strength. But the truth is, this is why it was hard for Harry to find a spouse, because when a partner came near him and started to feel the feeling of what it would be like to be married, there was a resistance, there was a reluctance. The potential partners would shy away, saying, "This doesn't feel right. I don't think I'm going to fit the role." And what they were feeling, really, what they were feeling, what they didn't realize, what they were feeling was a debilitated Venus. It's difficult for a man to have a debilitated Venus in the chart because uh, it doesn't help the wife. It brings misery to the wife, and this is exactly what happened. There was suicidal ideation. His wife had suicidal ideation early in their marriage, so this is not surprising. It's all public. It's all known. They're very open about it, and that's a gift, to the world. Um, so thank you. And you see it here. So it's very exciting to see what's happening with this chart. And you know, if I were speaking with Harry, I would say, you know, really do not worry about anything, because in 2025, when you enter Jupiter, the period of Jupiter, you are going to experience a tremendous amount of energy, support, success. It's going to be very easy. All of the shackles of your mind is going to fall away. Right now, being in Rahu period is a very turbulent period. It's very agitating. It's very obsessive. You've been obsessing, you've been thinking about everything, the press, the family, everything is so obsessive. You've been trying things, trying psychotropic drugs as medication. You've been going to therapy, thinking, fighting, combating, trying, fleeing, doing things. It's been very agitating. In 2025, and we're looking at March, the end of March of 2025, there's going to be a major shift. And that is going to be incredibly positive, because we are then moving into the Jupiter Mahapurusha Yoga. And once that gets activated, most of the important houses in the chart are protected. The fourth, the fifth, the house of the child, so the house of your children, protected. The ninth house, the house of your Dharma and your spiritual path, is protected. So keep doing what you're doing, and everything is going to work out. Namaste.